The NFL trade deadline is here. Will the Cowboys make a move? All that and more in this episode of Locked On Cowboys podcast.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked On Cowboys.
Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. We are free and available on all platforms. Today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code Locked On. That is prizepicks.com, promo code Locked On. I am Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. He is Landon McCool. Check him out on Twitter at McCoolBCB. Landon, the NFL trade deadline is here. How you doing today, buddy?
Good. It looks like it's been eventful so far. Minnesota and Detroit made a huge trade for TJ Hawkinson, which another kind of thing that's seemingly happening more and more. You're seeing where they're having in-division trades, which seemed to be a rarity before, but is happening more and more now. So it does look like a lot's going on. It'll be interesting to see if the Cowboys get involved.
Yeah, and even before that, on Monday, we had Roquan Smith being traded to the Bears. Just to let everybody know, we are recording this about 3 hours before the NFL trade deadline kicks off or it closes. Seems like we will get some moves here in a little bit. Let's start with this, Landon. Speaking on 105.3 The Fan this morning, Jerry Jones said that things could get feverish as the trade deadline approaches today. We've got some things we are entertaining. What are your first thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, it's interesting that Jerry's kind of coming out and saying stuff like that when he's been sort of kind of adamant against that. So, so recently, previously, frankly, right before he made that last trade last week for Hankins.
Yep.
Hankins. Yeah. So I think it's interesting that he's, this is what's hard to tell, right? Is this a situation where Jerry's just, playing the ringleader? He's Barnum and Bailey. He's trying to get your attention. He's trying to create, positive buzz for the team, or are they actually, kind of in the middle of it, looking at deals? I tend to think that they are looking at some things, but I also think that it's got to be the right thing, right?
Yeah.
Like I think that's the issue with a lot of the wide receiver talk. I feel like is that the wide receivers that are out there that we know are available, or at least rumored to be available for trade, it's like none of them really seem to be a great fit for what the Cowboys are looking for necessarily. So I tend to think that there may be a trade that is happening, but I think it might be something that we're not necessarily expecting.
Yeah, I will say this. I think the Cowboys are way more likely to trade away a player than to bring in somebody, just because. I mean, Landon, you look at the defensive line right now, and they just have too many players there, right?
Like they can't roster all of them.
No, and Tristan Hill was a healthy scratch last week. Terrell Basham is healthy now, and he's been a quality player. It seems like the Cowboys could potentially move one of those guys for a late day 3, probably, a late pick swap or a conditional 6th-round pick. That to me still feels like the most likely move the Cowboys will make.
Yeah, and I think that makes sense, right? I mean, they have, if anything, they've got players to trade away. They've got, like you said, there's a glut. They might as well get something for some of these guys. I tend to agree with you that I think that the trade that is most likely to happen would be a player away from the team for picks potentially.
And the names we're looking at again: Terrell Basham, Neville Gallimore, Tristan Hill. I don't know if I can see anybody else. That really feels like the 3 that are the most likely to be moved, at least in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, unless you wanted to get crazy. Well, no, I think that's likely the ones.
That's
I mean, I can't imagine anyone else, especially anyone on the offensive side at this point. And on defense, it's like that you have such a clear, spare parts, not spare parts, but like such a clear backup of defensive linemen that you're not going to be able to roster. You're not going to be able to play all of them. So might as well get something for one of them.
Yep, I agree. I want to talk about some potential moves the Cowboys can make over the next couple hours, because I don't know if the Cowboys are going to just add a depth player Like if they're going to make a move, it's going to be for an impact player. That's
Yeah.
at least my thought. Is that your read
Yeah.
here?
I agree. If they're bringing somebody in, then they're going to bring somebody in that's going to move the needle. I don't imagine, unless they do something kind of like what you suggested earlier in the week with Cedric Wilson, which
that's probably the only way, right?
Yeah, but other than that, I think if they're trading, they're likely going to be getting a pretty, an impact player as opposed to just making a small move of some sort.
They want to find somebody that can move the needle a little bit, right? And I mean, we like Cedric Wilson. I don't know if he does that, but I think there's some guys out there, and I think Jerry Jones, if they're going to make a trade, that's what they want to do. So let's get to some names on both sides of the ball. But before we do that, Landon, we want to tell everybody about Prize Picks and how much we absolutely love Prize Picks. All you have to do is pick 2 to 5 players, and if they score more or less in the Prize Pick projection, you win. You don't have to compete against other people. It's just you versus the projections available. Prize Picks offers projections on just about any sport that you watch. This includes NFL, NBA, MLB, NHL, PGA, college football, men's college basketball, women's college basketball, soccer, WNBA, esports, NASCAR, tennis, MMA, boxing, disc golf, Euro basketball, cricket, and more. Entries can be made in 60 seconds or less. It is that easy. They are currently operational in over 30 states and in Canada. Download the Prize Pick app or go to prizepicks.com to sign up and play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100. So that means if you deposit $100, they'll give you $100. If you deposit $75, they'll give you $75. Don't forget to enter promo code Locked On at sign up for an instant deposit match up to $100. All right, let's start on the offensive side of the ball. The receiver is really the position that we've been looking at. I've got a couple names that I'll throw out. You just kind of tell me yes or no. First one is Brandon. First one, Brandon Cooks. Texans have been exploring a trade. The Texans are actually practicing right now, and he's not on the field. So you wonder if the Texans do have a trade lined up. Salary is a little high there. He's getting older. But what are your thoughts on Brandon Cooks for Dallas?
If I remember correctly, the deal here is that he's due like something like $18 million next year, right?
Yes.
So that's really, unless you're planning on trading him and then just turning around and trading him again, like I don't imagine that they're so excited about potentially, going out and getting back into bed with another 15 to 17 plus $million.
And it's 18 million guaranteed next year.
Yeah. So it's all the full money. You can't work around that. So, I think that if the money situation was resolved somehow, like that maybe that's the one that makes some sense, I think, as far as the player and the trade and maybe what the Cowboys are looking for. But I don't think that the money situation is something that's going to be easily worked around. They would have to, convince Houston to take on some of that cash, which I don't think that they're willing to do for a trade.
Which they actually can't now. Now that we've passed the one, there was a Monday deadline for restructuring of deals. They can't now.
So yeah, I can't. I just don't imagine that the Cowboys would be willing to take on that kind of cash. I mean, maybe they would. I certainly wouldn't be totally against it. But just based on the way that they've made moves in the offseason, I don't imagine that that's something.
Yeah, just because you traded away Amari Cooper because you didn't want to pay a guy $20 million with the kind of stat line that he was having over the last couple of years. Now you want to turn around, give up draft assets to pay Brandon Cooks basically that same amount of money, who is having less of an impact in Houston. I mean, I wouldn't be opposed to it, but that's just one I don't see the Cowboys doing. Like, if they're going to make a trade for a receiver, that's just one that doesn't make a ton of sense.
And the other thing too to remember here is that, like, part of the other reason that they, got rid of Amari Cooper is that they didn't think that they were going to be able to get value out of him because they wanted to run the football more. They wanted to kind of give more touches to the backs, and so I just, that's why I think I would be a little bit surprised if it was like a high dollar value wide receiver. If you could get someone who's really good, who's on a cheap rookie contract or on the last year of a deal or something, that would make more sense to me because
yes,
you could justify that a lot more.
All right, and here's a receiver that's exactly what you're talking about. Nelson Aguilar, last year of his deal with New England. Didn't put up huge numbers last year in New England, but did have a really nice season in 2020 with the Raiders. He's just on a team that doesn't throw the ball down the field and frankly doesn't throw the ball a lot. His contract, very manageable going forward. I know Cowboy fans, you think of Nelson Aguilar and you're not that excited, but I think in the right role as like a number 3 receiver who can stretch the field, I like that.
Yeah, he's a different player than he was when he was with the Eagles. I mean,
Yes.
he just did not have a successful early part of the season. I mean, early part of his career. He's been to at least 2 teams since then. I can't remember who he was at with before the Patriots, but
Raiders.
The Raiders. That's right.
And he played really, really well with the Raiders.
Yeah, and I think then kind of earned himself a little contract with the Patriots. I think too.
Mm-hmm.
So
2 years, $22 million.
So they are dealing with a couple different situations. They may have several wide receivers on the market right now.
Kendrick Bourne's the other one. Yep.
Yeah, and so I do think that one makes some sense. The money is what's the money look like right now? Do you have that in front of you?
Yeah, so his base salary is $9 million, but because we're already halfway through the season, it's probably around $4.5, $5 million was what Dallas would owe him the rest of the year.
And she's, I mean, he's so yeah, 4.5 million. That seems much more reasonable to me, and that's kind of right in the price range that we're talking about, right? Like an experienced veteran wide receiver who can bring you some playmaking ability to the wide receiver room, but isn't someone that is going to command a whole bunch of touches, isn't going to be someone that you have to feel like you have to get involved into the game plan.
3 targets a game, and maybe 2 of them are down the field, right?
Yeah, exactly. I think that would be that would be a situation where you would get benefits without having to risk a lot of capital and money.
Yeah, and that's one I know Cowboy fans are not going to like that name, but I do think he has some value, especially on a team that needs another receiver that can play multiple spots, that can stretch the field. He had an awesome reception against the Steelers this year, like a 60-yard bomb down the field. I think he's a quality player, kind of stuck in a low-volume passing offense. Now, if the Cowboys were going to swing for the fences here, and they were going to really try to go out and get a big-name receiver, the name out there is DJ Moore, right? But I don't know if Dallas does that. Do you think? What do you think?
DJ Moore to me is the swing, right?
That's the swing.
He's the only one that to me makes a lot of sense, simply because I think you can do a lot of things with DJ Moore. He's not. I think he's one of those versatile type of wide receivers who doesn't necessarily need to be kind of an outside guy or an inside guy. You can move him around a little bit. He's got some ability to kind of be flexible and versatile. Mm-hmm. He's got explosion. It's the big swing because it's, this is a guy who will command touches, right? This is a guy that will command a certain amount of adding into the game plan. And I guess the question then becomes, do the Cowboys want to do that?
Do you want to give up a first-round pick and pay him, which, I mean, his actually base salary is low this year, but $19.9 million guaranteed in 2023, and then only $1 million guaranteed in 2024. But the Panthers would be eating a lot of money here. So you're going to have to give up probably a first-round pick plus X to go get him. It's a lot.
It's a lot. And it would excite me if we got him, but I can totally understand why that may be more than what the Cowboys are willing to get at this point, right? He's a great player, and honestly, I mean, I'm frankly shocked that Carolina is interested in moving him. I mean, I don't know that they are necessarily.
They'd have to be blown away by a trade.
Yeah, I think that's the truth. Yeah, okay. I agree.
I actually think it's more likely that the Cowboys add an impact defender than it is an offensive player, because we just went through a lot of the receivers, and there's just not a lot of guys that fit. Got a couple names for you, Landon, that I want to run through. And actually, my favorite trade target. But before we do that, we want to tell you about BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your number one source for football betting and basketball betting, as the basketball season has just started. Shout out to Steve Nash to get out of this season as quick as possible. Find all the latest player developments, team matchups, news, podcasts, and in-depth analysis on every game. And as always, BetOnline remains your continued source for all of your sports wagering information with live betting and up-to-the-minute scores for every single sport out there. It is the fastest and easiest way to check in on all of your favorite games and events, including MLB, MMA, boxing, and golf. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. Bet online, where the game starts. All right, Landon, let's talk about some defensive guys. Is there one defender out there that you would love to see the Cowboys trade for?
I mean, there's a couple, I think, if Jeffrey Okudah was available,
It sounds like he might be.
And the price was right, I might be interested in that. Simply because I think you've got great players at the position. You could maybe move off some of these guys. You're not going to get, Lewis is probably done at this point, I think, with the Cowboys.
You can cut him and save $5 million next year. It's probably
You could get a guy who comes in here who is a decent cover guy, but beyond that too, I mean, I don't know that I've ever seen a defensive back play the run the way that he did against the Cowboys.
Yeah,
so
he can really tackle.
And I think that's something that's important. If you look at what the teams are trying to do to the Cowboys, they're trying to attack the defensive backs and try to get outside and to the edge, hoping that they can hook the defensive ends and then forcing these defensive backs to tackle. If you get someone like Jeffrey Okudah in there, you might be a lot more solid in that specific aspect of the game. And I think it upgrades your coverage overall. Now, I don't think this is necessarily necessary, and it probably is more than the Cowboys are willing to pay, considering that they have some depth there. But I do think that if the Cowboys were to trade for Okudah, it would be a slam dunk improvement on this defense.
I agree, because then Anthony Brown can either go to being your slot corner or just your third outside corner.
Yeah.
I like it a lot. I don't know what the price would be. A second rounder probably feels a bit too much considering his injury history and how he's played, but I don't know if Detroit does it for a third rounder either. I got one for you. You want to talk about somebody moving the needle for the Cowboys, and I think changing the way that we view this team going forward. I've got a player who is a multi-time Pro Bowl player who has no guaranteed money left on his contract, and his team is really struggling right now.
Does he play for the Colts?
He does play for the Colts.
I think I know who it is. Go ahead.
How about DeForest Buckner?
I was just going to say. It makes sense, too, because if you think about the trade that he went away from San Francisco, right? And when they just felt like they had a lot of depth at defensive tackle, he's been dominant in both spots. So I really like this idea.
And so just to be clear about his contract, no guaranteed money left in 2023 or 2024. The base salary is $11 million. So you're paying him probably $5.5-ish million this year. You want to talk about a guy that would fit Dan Quinn's defense perfectly, right? You could play him as a 5 technique. You could play him as a 3 technique. You could have him even play 1 on certain situations. You pair him with Osa and Hankins and Parsons and Lawrence, and now we're talking about a defensive line that can stop the run and can get pressure all over the field. I would be willing to give up at least a second-round pick for DeForest Buckner, even though he's 28 years old.
100%. 100%, I would too. I think that I mean, especially with the contract details being the way they were, I wasn't aware of that. That really kind of drives it home, the value there, right? For the Colts, look, their season's kind of falling apart as we stand here. They may as well try to get some assets while they can. I think that you take a defensive tackle position that was good, had some depth, had a couple players, to great, really quickly. If Osa Odigizua is your third defensive tackle rotating in, man, you're living good.
And the thing is, he can fill so many roles for you, right? Like that 4-eye, if you want that to be him and not Chauncey Golston, great. If you want him to be the only defensive tackle on the field on 3rd and 9, awesome. I just think that's the type of player that could flip a playoff game, right? And we've seen him do it before with the 49ers, and we've seen him play really well for the Colts. I just think he's the kind of guy that does move the needle for the Cowboys.
And I think the other thing too you have to consider is that he's the kind of guy that he's going to be dominant and at the defensive tackle position. They can swing him all the way inside and out from, like you said, 1 to the 5. And one of the best things about it is that since the Cowboys have numbers at defensive tackle, you might be able to convince the Colts to let you swap a player and a lower pick, right?
Yep.
You may be able to convince them, hey, do you want Gallimore? Do you want Tristan Hill? And then we'll trade for a third, right? Instead, or something like that. I think that would be really beneficial. Or, frankly, you've got enough of these guys. It could be Basham. It could be, any one of these. So
who played well for them before. Yep.
Yeah. I think that one makes a lot of sense. I just don't know if the Colts are interested.
They should be. I mean, they really should be. One more just really quickly I'll throw out. I don't know how interested Washington is in doing interdivision trades, but Deron Payne is on the last year of his contract. I don't see Washington re-signing him considering how much money they've already given Jonathan Allen. I love Deron Payne. I would be willing to pay him what he needs on the open market. I think that's somebody who you could play with Osa, you could play with Hankins, and he really, really helps your run defense. But again, interdivision trades are so tough.
Yeah, and I imagine a position like that where this is a marquee player that they know they're going to lose. I don't think they're going to want to necessarily give them away to the Cowboys for what they would get for him. So,
probably not. They'd rather just hold on to him and try to re-sign him in the offseason. At least that's probably my takeaway here. All right, Landon. So we still have about 2.5 hours left to the deadline. No Cowboys moves as we were recording this podcast. I was hoping to strike lightning twice, right? We had it happen with the Hankins deal. Did not happen today. So if you're listening to this podcast and the Cowboys didn't make a move, sorry, we apologize. Just the nature of the beast here. If the Cowboys did make a move, we will be talking about it on Wednesday. I am sure. Right, so let's hope that happens. That would be a lot of fun. We're gonna be back on Wednesday to talk about some of our all 22 notes from the Cowboys win over the Bears. We want to thank you for making Locked On Cowboys your first listen. For your next listen, check out the Locked On Sports Today podcast, the biggest stories of the day, plus instant reaction, big game recaps, and the take of the day. Available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. Please go check us out on YouTube. Subscribe over there. You can follow Landon on Twitter at McCoolBCB. I am at Marcus_Mosher. Enjoy the rest of the trade deadline. We'll see you guys next time.